Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Awesome. We're so excited to be here today, and we have a wonderful group of panelists. My name is Briseida Lopez. I work at Electronic Arts as a Senior Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator there, and I manage a lot of our inclusion efforts and different sponsorships that we do with events such as this one. What I'm going to do is that first I want all of the panelists to introduce themselves, and they'll talk a little bit about why they're here and like what drew their interest in participating in this panel, and then we'll get started.
Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Okay, hey guys. Oh good, we can all be nervous together. My name's Jessica Merzin. I am the community and lead new media manager for BioWare Edmonton, so I work on Mass Effect and Dragon Age. And I want to take a picture of you guys all right now. You are like passively consenting to be all over Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, there, cool. All right, my social media coordinator would be super happy now. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here actually. I first remember hearing about this, and one of my big passions on my own time on like Twitter, I'll go into rants about equality, about feminism, about LGBT rights, and it's just something. I'm an anthropologist by trade, and I'm really focused on identity issues and inclusivity. So right now, I can't talk too much about it, but right now we are actually doing a major overhaul on my team to basically try to change the future of the internet and make it a better place for everyone. So that is kind of why I'm excited to be on this panel and here this weekend, because the internet is not just for the dude bros. That's...
My name is Rez Graham. I'm the lead AI programmer on The Sims 4. Previous to that, I worked on The Sims Medieval. So why am I here? I'm here because similarly, I feel strongly about equal rights, about people being able to love whoever they want, and none of that stuff matters. The fact that gay rights is even an issue sort of pains me. Like, why is that even an issue? Why is that not just a no-brainer? So to be here on this panel and to work on games like The Sims, where everyone else feels basically the same way, is really inspiring and really honored. I'm honored to be here, so thank you.
Hey guys, I'm JM Sadsina. I'm currently working as an assistant producer for the Chief Creative Office at EA, which is like kind of like a think tank. And I'm just really excited to be here. I just got out of school, and I was one of the only LGBT kids actually in our class studying games at USC. And it was kind of disheartening when I first started, but then I realized it was something that shouldn't be disheartening. It should be something that changes, and I want to see so much more of that, and make games that get people excited, that get LGBT gamers excited about gaming, and inspire them to start joining the industry and change it. So I'm really honored to be here as well.
Hi, my name's David Gator. I am the lead writer for the Dragon Age series for BioWare. I've been with BioWare for going on 15 years now, ever since I worked on Baldur's Gate 2, I guess was my first game. So I guess I kind of get dovetailed into issues of inclusion and as a result of having worked on so many of our characters and romances, and it's so strange. I can mark over the course of my career a time when it was unheard of to have this conversation at all. It wasn't even something, we didn't talk about it and say we can't do this. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't possible. And to have reached a place where gamers can come together under this kind of common banner, and you know, I almost feel like we're reaching the stage where we are becoming accepted as gamers. I mean, you almost think that that shouldn't be a consideration, but I just think it's so great that this is a conversation that has developed to a point where we can come together like this. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
week or two, all of the panelists and our team met together, and we came up with different questions that we thought that you guys might want answers to. So we'll go through, we'll go till about 11:30 to 11:45, and then we'll open it to questions, and I think someone in the back will be a mic runner for our awesome panelists. So whoever wants to take this first, from your personal perspective, what do you believe historically have been the challenges in the gaming industry with a topic including LGBT characters in video games?
Sure, I'll jump on that. So I started working at Maxis maybe 3 years ago, and I was curious, so I started digging, right? I started asking questions about what was that first conversation like when it came to, are we going to support same-sex couples in The Sims, in the original Sims, right? Because it started in the original Sims. And what I found out, which I didn't know at all, was the lead engineer on the original Sims was openly gay, and so he had a reputation for just going in and implementing shit. And he just did it. He just went in there and it just was a thing one day. And, but nobody really questioned it, which was cool. On The Sims Medieval and also on The Sims 4, the conversation, I was curious how the conversation was going to go. It boiled down to exactly one meeting, which was, how do we want to support this? There was never a question of, do we support this? There was a question of, how do we want to support this? I would love to hear more of your thoughts, because you said, because you've been in this industry long enough, and I've been certainly a gamer long enough to where, yeah, it wasn't even a thing for a very, very long time. The Sims was one of the early games that started doing that kind of stuff. So I'm really curious to hear, not to throw you onto the fire, but I'm very curious to hear what, where you saw that change, if you thought it was a conscious change or not. From a gaming point of view, I was excited about it.
I think for a long time it just was assumed that nobody would accept it, because, you know, the common perception out there is that games are played by children, right? So people are very protective of children. The thought that you could go to somebody who wasn't themselves a gamer and say, hey, we're thinking of putting gay characters and gay relationships into our games, and then of course they'd be shocked. It's sort of like, you know, sex scenes in the first Mass Effect, and you know, people jaws dropped. Oh my God, interactive sodomy. I don't know what game they were playing, but it wasn't ours. So I think that there was just a lot of assumptions that this was the case, and I mean, I think there was a few times. I remember we broached the topic a little bit in Knights of the Old Republic. We had Juhani was a female character, and I remember that the topic came up that, hey, maybe we could make her a lesbian, and I think, you know, it's sad to think of it now, because we talked about it, and about that I was like, it was almost like we were joking, but not in a way that we thought that was silly. We thought, oh, we can't seriously make her a lesbian, you know. And it's weird, because, you know, I'm gay myself, and the idea that I didn't take it seriously and just didn't even question it, right? That's what the mentality was, and that's not that long ago. That's what, well, maybe it is. Maybe it's 10 years ago. Wow, I feel old now. But I mean, it's not like we went and tried to ask permission or anything. We kind of hid it in the game a little bit, because she never comes out and actually says, "I love you." She talks around it. There's another character she mentions in the game who was her lover in the past, but she never says she was my lover. She just says we were very close. Things like that, and we didn't think about it until afterwards. I think I wasn't actually on the Jade Empire team, but that was the first time that we actually included it. And because it seemed like not every game is going to address issues of sexuality, right? It just, for Bioware games, because we had sex, it seemed like not addressing that topic. It started as time went by. It seemed like a very obvious exclusion. Like it went from us just not questioning it to, well, you know, maybe by by not addressing it, it started to feel like we were avoiding the topic, and it's like, well, what are we saying about the people that we believe are playing our game by excluding it? I think that's, and it wasn't even like we had this long conversation either. I talked to people who were on the Jade Empire team, and they said one day they're just like, why don't we just make the romances available to both genders? And they're like, okay. That was apparently the entire conversation. So.
I've always wondered, because I grew up with gaming. There's an interesting shift recently that gamers are a certain person, but we had Nick Arcade, and there was all kinds of kids on there, and it wasn't an issue. Everyone gamed. And I've always wondered if, as I freaked out and was like, I love The Sims, but I do. I grew up with The Sims, and it didn't really seem like a big issue. I'm pretty sure that's how I learned about sex in the first place.
You learned about sex as woohoo?
Yeah.
That's what I called it for years.
I learned about sex with woohoo, and then I made the mistake in the 6th grade of Googling www.jessica.com, and that was a porn site. So a mix of those two things, but it almost seems like, and especially now, looking back, games like The Sims, even though there's a lot of strategy if you don't use the Rosebud sheet, there's a lot of strategy, but now it's almost seen like, oh, well, that was a casual game. And in casual games, the rules are different. And in games like BioWare, it's almost, oh, well, that's a mature title. That's for men aged 18 to 23. We can't talk about those things. And it's almost baffling that games are considered different levels of, I guess, maturity, and that they would broach the subject differently from a consumer standpoint of, oh, well, of course it's in The Sims. The Sims is for children, which I'm sorry. I grew up on that, but there are mature themes. So I've always wondered from a dev perspective if that was also seen to be the case, or if that's just kind of a consumer bias.
I think there was a little bit of a feeling of different rules for different games. I think the Sims conversation was probably a little bit different from ours. We had to overcome what I called the ick factor, really, and it was just this feeling, not necessarily among the team. I imagine developer teams can be very different cultures, right? You might get a developer team where the guys are, very straight and are very conservative. Like that's gonna vary from company to company. But I think a lot of it was the assumptions we made about our own audience, what they would accept, and kind of it was a little bit of like throwing a cherry bomb into the toilet and seeing what happens, and figuring out slowly that the ick factor out there is not as prevalent as we led ourselves to believe.
What was that?
Is this working?
I don't think your mic's working.
I don't think my mic's working.
Your mic's supposed to be about this far away from you, otherwise your peas will start popping. So it should be this. Sorry,
How about this? Oh.
I'm a
All right.
Don't eat these mics.
So have I just been yelling into the crowd so far?
You've been yelling.
All right.
It's okay.
All right, we're starting the panel over.
We'll angle all our mics towards you.
There we go.
I actually wanted to go back to something that Jessica was saying, in that the way you were pointing out how The Sims was seen as like a casual kids game, and then we were getting into these more mature titles with Mass Effect that are made for older audiences. And for me, it's funny because I think I was born right at the perfect time that, with me discovering that I was gay and coming out, games kind of came out with me. Mm-hmm. And the fact that like when I was in middle school, like that's when I was playing Sims, and that's when I was like, oh wait, like maybe, like this isn't, like why am I fucking around with these avatars like this? Like maybe I'm gay. And I think that that kind of continued though, because then I got older and I realized that with games like Mass Effect, which were closer to the games that I was actually playing and actually interested in, that time to suddenly see LGBT themes come up in those games was awesome for me. And so I'd actually say I'm really lucky, because I went from being a kid where games really were they just didn't talk about it, and it was sort of that thing where it was ignorance. And so I think people thought maybe if we ignore it, like we just don't have to have an opinion, and so we're safe. But I don't think ignorance is in any way, shape, or form acceptance. So it was nice to have it develop as I was developing, I guess.
That's really interesting to hear, especially as a developer of these types of games. When you're a developer, so I played The Sims for a while, and then I started working on The Sims, and it's a very different relationship when you're working on a game. And in a way, you almost lose touch with the playing of the game, which is a conversation we were just having over there. And so I was really inspired by that story. That was really cool, because the fact that a game and a decision that seemed obvious to us at the time helps people in that way to sort of discover themselves.
You know, there's nothing so great than getting an email from someone who said that Dragon Age helped them come out, helped them realize who they were. Or I had one guy who told me, it was actually a very emotional email. He just he said he was thinking of suicide.
Wow. And
because he was just felt so closed off, and it actually playing the game with his brother. And his brother, I guess, because, you know, I think it was Alistair, actually, because he's just so in love with Alistair. And even though he couldn't romance Alistair, but they were playing the game, and his brother kind of cautiously floated so would you romance Alistair if he was an option? And, of course, he was blown away because he had no idea that his brother knew anything at all. And it enabled this conversation between them. And his brother told him, like, yeah, man, I've known for a long time, and I totally accept you. And he said, you know, obviously Dragon Age wasn't directly responsible, but the fact that it enabled the conversation, and that's not the only that kind of email I've gotten. It is a really great feeling to know that in some tiny way you've helped some people like that.
You know, I actually got an email yesterday as I was boarding the plane from Burbank to San Francisco, from one of our fans who I've interacted with a lot at conventions and things, who it's never been something where she's like, I'm out and proud, but you know, it's part of her identity, but she doesn't feel the need to like scream at the rooftop about it. But she told me that she just got engaged to her partner that she met on Twitter through talking about Mass Effect. And that it was actually Mass Effect that helped her come to terms with the fact that she wasn't straight as she thought for 40 years. Mm-hmm. That she was actually a lesbian, and she met this wonderful woman through Mass Effect, and last week they got engaged.
I think it's not even what we can do for our gay fans. I think there's also something that making it normal and something you encounter for every fan out there is a really important thing as well. I mean, I just finished playing The Last of Us, and there's the character Bill comes up. It's not even it's not a sexual situation, but you have to infer that he's gay, though it's made pretty plain. But the fact that he's there, and he just happens to be a gay character that you encounter, and the very fact that he's present, I think, is important. And I think that as we go on, you know, this would be a normal thing that nobody would question it, that you wouldn't have to write stories about it or comment on it. I think that's the way we achieve that kind of inclusivity, right? That it's about making interesting characters. They're more diverse because they're interesting, and I think that can have a very important effect as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I think the cool thing about Bill in that game was also just the fact that he mentions his partner earlier on, and then he's just like a side character, but you never really see the partner until later, so you don't know who he really is referencing. Like if it is like a partner in crime, like it's just very vague. And so when you do find out later, I think that it was an awesome reveal. And then also I really appreciated how the other characters in the story reacted to it, in that there was no, you know, like shock or surprise, or it was just like, oh, like I'm so sorry. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah.
That casualness is the day that I'm waiting for personally. The casualness where it's just not an issue. It's just not an issue. It's just accepted. It's just there. Like that's the day that I'm waiting for. That's the day that I'm excited about.
Do you think that's too optimistic though?
No.
Sometimes it feels like it is. You know, the kind of ugliness you encounter online is always present, and you can never be sure whether it's more out there just under the surface, or whether you're dealing with just this small little minority of people that feel that way.
I think that's what it is. I mean, honestly, being someone who literally lives on the internet, and seeing like some of the telemetry about who our players are and what they choose to be, I think there's, unfortunately, right now, the way the internet works, and my team's working to change that, but right now, the person who shouts the loudest and is able to sit at their computer the longest is the person who wins. And unfortunately, those are people that aren't going to places like this, that aren't going outside and interacting with other people. And there's, maybe they just need some vitamin D, I don't know. But there's always going to be bigots. Unfortunately, it's just amplified online. I don't think that actually represents the majority of people, because when you go to events, when you go to conventions, I'll get maybe 3 people in a year that are just creepy and rude and awful, and most people are not that way. And now the problem is that I'm excited about. I'm not a game designer. I can't do all of those things, but I can have a voice in shaping the internet that is, let's bring this feeling here to the online space. And then I think it will be just a non-issue.
I think it was an important change from a developer perspective as well. It was not being so afraid of those people and getting to the point where you say, no, you're the one with the problem. You're the one that has to get over it, you know? I think that is a very important skill. We've kind of blown the questions out of the water.
I know. We probably answered like all of them.
Spent so much time on this. So you guys discussed a little bit about the games that you're working on, and you touched on different things. So based on the games that you work on, how do you think this has benefited the gaming industry, and how do you think you're going to incorporate all these changes that have happened moving forward?
I think that the most recent thing that I worked on was Mass Effect 3, and to say that it was controversial is you know, the thing that made me very happy was there are things you always anticipate, and then obviously things you do not anticipate. And we knew that Trainer and Cortez were going to be, we beefed up our support on that. It was something where even I played it for the first time, and I was like, whoa, Cortez is like a man's man, and he is absolutely nonchalant about the fact that he's gay. And it's an important step that you don't have to be a certain way to be gay. You don't have to fit a certain stereotype. And it was an issue. We knew it would be, but I'm not happy that there were lots of issues, but I am happy that that wasn't the biggest issue. I'm happy that that was a bunch of total awful people that I was like, thanks for pointing yourself out. Now you were banned. Now we don't have to deal with you. But those are important steps that, okay, well, 10, 15 years ago, that might have shattered everything. That would have been on Fox News. That would have been people boycotting the BioWare office. And at this point, it was like, no, that was a big issue for some people, but for a lot of people, it was like, yeah, it's about time that happened.
I loved Cortez, yeah. I thought that was really cool. He was this very, very, like, masculine male who then, again, very nonchalantly turned out to be gay. Like, that is a great direction that I love to move into.
His husband, though, was the deadest husband that was ever dead. He was so dead.
So there's a movie I don't know if you've seen, which had a similar effect called Paranorman. Has anyone seen this movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So they did the same type of thing where at the end, my boyfriend would love you. That was awesome. I love that kind of stuff. It's so just where they're playing with those stereotypes where gay doesn't have to be this like extreme stereotype. And excuse me. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm super inspired by. So yeah, on The Sims, I loved, I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit. I loved the way that you put the ick factor, right? Because when you deal with trying to simulate humanity, there's other very much more significant ick factors that we have to try and take into account. And just, so from an artificial intelligence point of view, which is what I do, when you first sort of release Sims into the world, and give them the ability to woohoo, they'll just go wild, right? You have to add in some of the social inhibitions, and so like we have to deal with things like incest, right? We have to make sure that they can't, that you can't sleep with your brother and that kind of stuff, and so when you have to explicitly write code to make sure that that level of ick factor doesn't happen. Homosexuality doesn't seem in any way wrong, right? And then you have interesting questions with the ESRB where, what was it? They're an interesting group because they freaked out one time on The Sims Medieval when there were two male Sims sitting on a bench, sort of cuddling, because the rule was. We weren't allowed to have homosexual encounters unless the player initiated something, unless the player determined yes. So Sims all start out basically asexual, and then based on whether you initiate same-sex or opposite-sex relations, then it starts setting flags and stuff. So they freaked out because they said that there was none of that stuff. Yet then we start asking them other interesting questions about like, well, what happens if you have two step-siblings, or if you have like step-sibling and step-parent and all that stuff? And they're like, yeah, whatever. So it's sort of weird what they like and what they don't, and very much based on like the game as well. So the ESRB is very interesting, and I think that they're going to be an interesting group to try and win over to hopefully reach a world where it is just not an issue, to where there's not even a checkbox on whatever checklist that they have when they go through games, right?
Speaking from the perspective of the games that I've worked on, I think the effect that the gay romances that we've had that is important for the industry, I think, is in the way that it's kind of debunked a lot of the assumptions we had prior to BioWare doing that. I mean, we're a pretty big company. Our games are pretty high profile, and I think it's fair to say that our taking that step affected our sales in absolutely no way whatsoever. I mean, maybe there's people who didn't like it and say they're not going to buy a BioWare game because it has optional gay romances that they don't have to use, but other people might. If that's the stance they want to take, cool. But I think we have equal evidence that there are people who bought the game specifically because it included that. I mean, and I think that's important as well. Like seeing gay fans self-identify, like on our forums, people who have come and said, "I have bought this game because I heard it had gay romances, and I wouldn't even normally have played the game, but I went out and bought it." That's the sort of language that companies listen to. Yeah. I mean, it's not a cynical thing. It's true. That ultimately, like, sure, as developers we're there to make art, but we're also there to survive and make money. And publishers are definitely there to survive and make money. So it's important that they hear that. So that us including that has brought out the fans who have talked about it, and in talking about it, they are making their presence heard. And I think that is ultimately the most important step as far as publishers are concerned.
Yeah, our official stance at EA, if you don't want to buy our games because they have LGBT content, is, well, fuck you then. I mean, that's like our official response.
That's probably not the exact message.
I'm pretty sure it is. I've seen it. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure
that's Peter Moore. Peter Moore,
yeah,
fuck you. He's just singing Lily Allen. He's just like, fuck you very much.
That's right.
Just give us that. He did say that. He
didn't.
No, well, he didn't say that. But, okay, that was no the underlying when we got the like worst company in the world award for a second year in a row. He was like, yes, there are a lot of things that we can do better, but there are a lot of things that people don't like about us that we're not going to stop doing. And LGBTQ rights was one of those. And I thought, unfortunately, I didn't like that it was like sandwiched between this message, no, we're not that bad, don't worry. But, Peter Moore tried. I think for me, and it is difficult that people don't really have the trust that community managers really do anything besides taking pictures and tweeting them. But one of my biggest things that I do is I advise on what things our fans will want in the game versus not want in the game. I had a really big role in what went into the extended cut. I worked with our creative director for Dragon Age on just kind of being like a one-person focus test. If I can see anything in my career when I retire or die, whichever happens first, the thing that I really want to help shape is this misconception that, first of all, gender and sex are not the same thing. And second of all, neither are a binary. Unfortunately, with our, I guess, tech limitations and totally insane programming, you pick a male or a female character when you think God can customize your character. I hope that someday, after we get through the amazing milestones, that you don't have to just be male or female, because that's not how our world exists. You don't have to have, our sexuality, all of those things are on a spectrum. If you are academic-minded, Judith Butler is one of my, I'm seeing some heads nod. I'm not the only one who, Judith Butler talks all about that. It's not, back in like the 17th century, people thought that women were like underdeveloped men. That lady parts were just men who weren't fully developed, and that boys were the same thing. And now we know that that's not true. Eventually, we will also know that sexuality and gender are different on a widespread scale, and that it's on a spectrum. So I hope someday we'll see that in a game as well, that you don't just pick male or female. You can be somewhere in between, and that's totally normal.
Sorry.
And I definitely... And I definitely think we're actually approaching that point faster than you would think. I don't think necessarily in mainstream games we are, and that's the problem. But I think the indie crowd has already had this like awesome influx. A lot of the stuff Anthropy does. It's just so cool to see these games that aren't binary at all and aren't typical and are really exploring like what it means to be a human and not what it means to be like Avatar, male or female.
Right.
And it's just not like that. And it's so cool to see this community flourishing and really starting to grow out of nothing almost, where everyone is now suddenly getting access to like Unity and Game Salad and all these programs that let them make games and are just putting these like tiny little games out there that maybe last 25 seconds, maybe last 5 minutes, but are exploring these things we've never seen before.
It's definitely an interesting challenge as gaming is an art form and technology, because when it's almost trying to stick two things together that don't mesh. The fact that in human biology and anthropology, psychology, there is this huge spectrum, limitless opportunities, and yet, just our very language about gaming, binary, zeros and ones, digital, the digits, that you don't have anything in between. And so I think that it's amazing gaming in general and technology can explore how those two things, they're never going to come together because they're totally separate things, but how the digital and the binary can explore those limitless options in the spectrum.
Yeah, I agree that the conversation is changing really rapidly, and I think it's changing at the level of the publishers and developers as well. Because when we have conversation, I think there's a growing awareness that a lot of the objections that have commonly been used among developers just sort of don't feel very honest anymore. Like that, you have to sort of stop and analyze where it's coming from, and a lot of it's deep rooted. There's always going to be, at least right now, there's always going to be that first resistance to that kind of change. But I think there is a growing awareness that there is responsibility on the part of developers, that using the excuse, well, it's just a game, isn't going to fly. That there's enough discussion over what this means to people, what the kind of damage it can do. that I think that we're starting to become more aware of the sorts of social responsibilities that games have. That, yes, they are just games, but that you cannot simply shrug off everything that goes along with that. That not only is there a responsibility, but there's a lot of good we can do, and it needn't affect your bottom line. And I think that is the second point of resistance, and I think that's a very important point of concern.
But it has to come from the company level.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's important to do the grassroots, but ultimately, thankfully, we have companies like EA that are standing up, because that's where change happens.
Yeah. If EA wanted to, they could definitely stop any developer working under them from including stuff like this, but they do not. And so I think the EA culture is really important in helping that change.
And that for me was one of the reasons. I mean, just looking at the games at first, but then also talking to people in the industry. Having just entered it, I sought out EA, from the beginning as just a company that I knew I could go to and have ideas for LGBT themes in games, or just any idea really, and have them listen to it, because you see them, as much as they are this huge corporation, they're still at the forefront and listening to what people want, and trying to push what people will accept and see where they can go with it. And I love that about it.
So we've gotten to that time where we have to make some closing remarks. So I will ask you one last question, just so all of you have time to ask some questions. So with all of these things that we've talked about, we've discussed how EA is an inclusive employer and how you've felt empowered to include these inclusive efforts into your games. What is your hope for the future for the gaming industry as a whole when it comes to leading inclusive efforts and including LGBT, where it becomes kind of a thing that you don't think about anymore?
Well, I already said mine. I mean, let's work toward the spectrum, for sure.
Yeah, for me, it's much of what I've been saying, where I want it to just simply not be an issue. And I think some of the things like with Cortez and other such things that Leica and that other people here at EA are doing, where the conversation is not about if we include it, but how we include it, and it just becomes an obvious next step, which is where we're pushing towards. And that it's not just EA, and it's not just EA, but that there are other companies, and that it's sort of the standard, and that it's just not a thing anymore. It's something that's just a part of life, because this is a part of life.
I agree. I really wanted to, I love the idea of it's just not a thing anymore, because currently what we're seeing, and I like that we're seeing LGBT characters included in games, but I hate the idea that sometimes they do feel like that token gay character. And that's it's going to happen. But I want to get to a point where we just have all sorts of characters in a game, and maybe there's a gay character, maybe you never find out they're gay. But we're not making these assumptions that they're straight, and it's just realistic. And we're getting to a point where you can play a game and say, this is so much closer to real life because these are real people.
Yeah, getting to a point where we reflect humanity, because we have recognizing that we have a broad and diverse audience, that these are the people that we want playing our games. I think I just would like to get to a point where, it's always going to be a token character unless you have a spectrum, not necessarily in the same game, because it may not fit. Like, not every game is going to be everything to all people. That's just not going to happen. But I think when we get to the point in the industry where somebody could take a collection of games, any games, and could expect to find diversity throughout those games, I think that's where we need to get. Because then you don't need to worry about token characters. You're not going to have a developer going, oh my God, we were thinking of having one gay character, but maybe people might focus on that. But it's but if there were a number of gay characters throughout games, people might not be put all these expectations on that one character, right? I think we get to the point where we can take some of the pressure off of it, so that the creators, even if they're not gay or black or transgender or what have you themselves, that they feel like they not only should put these characters in, but that it's okay to go in and maybe make a mistake, that maybe it's not going to be the end of the world.
So with that, we are going to open it for questions. We have 19 minutes before we have to exit this room. So if you have any questions, I think there's some mic runners back there. So just raise your hand and they'll come to you.
They're like, run. They're like, yeah, getting ready to run.
You've been doing calisthenics this whole time.
Yeah. I've been like, I'm mentally preparing for this.
It's a moment to shine.
So something I was wondering is, what do you think it would take to get publishers, not necessarily the developers, but the actual publishers, to greenlight a game where the central protagonist, the player-controlled character, is a gay character, and not in the way of Dragon Age or Mass Effect, where it's an option, but that is who they are. They are, for the story of the game, a gay character, especially since in 2013, the developers for Remember Me had to fight tooth and nail to make their heterosexual protagonist female. Because one of the justifications given was, we can't have our players making this female character kiss her boyfriend. That was one of the reasons they were given when they were said, no, we can't have her a female, she has to be male.
Yeah, either, oh, hey, it works. It's tough to you think about you're talking about a canonically homosexual character, right? Like not an RPG where you decide, like a game like Last of Us or what have you, where the character is always gay, right? Yeah, it's when there's resistance right now to even making the main character female, it's hard to imagine a world where that character could be gay. I think, just be speaking from my personal experience, I think we'd have a lot easier time having a lesbian main character before we'd have a male homosexual character. I know that probably shouldn't be the case, but I think in the minds of a lot of marketers out there, that they could say, oh yeah, I bet you all the straight guys playing the game would love having a lesbian character to control, and so they could see the scenes and stuff. And that's it's a little bit bothersome as well, because that's like, well, is it there for titillation? I don't think that anybody really wants that either. So I think there is a lot of resistance among the people marketing the game. Really is where that comes down to, where they need to maybe overcome the assumptions, because there's a lot of what they would feel are examples. Like, this game had a female main character and it did not sell well, so clearly it didn't sell well because it had a female main character. That kind of logical thinking, you laugh, but that is in fact the thinking out there. That is this hump of assumptions regarding, never mind among what developers face. Of we making the games, there's a whole different set of assumptions among the people who have to sell the games, and that's where the big changes would need to happen for something like that to be possible.
I think it's has to come from a company level. It's also important to come from a consumer level. Buy games that you want to play, not just the big titles out there. Don't put your money towards something that you fundamentally don't agree with, even if it's the game that all your friends are talking about. Because I don't think, knowing a lot of the people at the top, I don't think fundamentally they're bigots. I think fundamentally they're capitalists, and they will make what they think is going to sell. So the more on the consumer level that you just vote with your wallet, I think hopefully that can come a little sooner than not, and that's where indie games are really important.
And I also think we're seeing the gamer culture change so quickly too, especially with like mobile and again just like the indie crowd and EA games having, and just mainstream games having LGBT characters. So as the game culture becomes more LGBT, I think the timer will just start going a little bit faster and a little bit faster until we have that main gay character, because you need the fans there. And I mean, at the end of the day, a company, is going to want to make money, and so they're not going to make a game that they don't think anyone will play. But if the fan base has that desire for it and wants to see that game happen and will really support it, it'll happen.
So my the thing that I think. Well, let me go backwards. So there's a really great game. One of my favorite games of all time was the original Metroid. And so that had a big reveal at the end, which I think we've passed the statute of limitations. The main character is female. And that was revealed at the very end if you got like a really good time. Whereas, so in a way, as sort of dirty as it seems to like sneak it in, I think that kind of thing has a better chance of working, right? Where almost like Bill or something in Last of Us, where it's just not even mentioned or a thing at all, or again with, I forget the character's name in Paranorman, but where it's a thing that's sort of mentioned at the end. And then what's gonna happen is the internet is gonna explode and everyone's gonna freak out, and that's fine, and people will scream loud on the internet. But I think that sort of thing will help pave the way, because that's not gonna affect sales as much, and actually it might affect sales in a positive way, because I think as those people scream about, they have gay people in this game, then people are gonna go, oh wow, really, okay, and then just start forking out money, right?
I tell you though, you've mentioned the indie scene, and I think that's a really important thing to mention, because the publishers are companies, they're capitalists, like Jessica said. Nothing's gonna change so quickly as when some indie game, eventually breaks out and sells a lot of copies, because I mean they're not only capitalists, they're copycats. They will jump onto that bandwagon so fast. And then honestly, like it takes smaller titles that can assume the risks that the big publishers won't to sort of pave the way. That's really and if you as consumers are going to do anything, support the indie games that do the things that you want to see happen in the bigger titles, because that's where it's going to happen first.
That's right. 100% agree.
Oop, is this on? Yes, it is. One thing that I noticed in non-interactive media that games seem to skip over was there was a period in film and television where a character's entire character and their entire story was their sexuality. They were the gay character and their story was the gay story or the trans story. Whereas I think what we're seeing now are fully fleshed out characters where their sexuality is just one element of an entire rounded character. So characters like Cortez. So Cortez's story is his grief over the loss of his husband. Bill's story is he's a hermit, a crazy paranoid hermit. And their sexuality is a secondary thing. So what I suppose I'm asking is, how do you see this moving forward? The strategies for you as people who make games or work on games to work toward sexuality being just one element of a character rather than being their entire defining characteristic?
I think I'll just jump in on that. Just that I think the important leap that gets made is at some point changing the conversation from the assumption over what this character is, because it's hardly ever that they're saying, oh, these guys should all be straight white dudes. It's the lack of to them a reason to make them anything else, and getting to the point where it enters the conversation where it's like, why can't this character be gay? Why can't this character be female or transgender? Getting to that point where that just is something that automatically comes up, as opposed to the assumption, like the default is that they're all straight white men. You know what I mean? That once we've made that transition and it's just expected, that's where that changes. Because then you're not starting a character like, we're going to make the gay character, and it is just, this is a character like, say, Bill, who, and I've never talked to developers, so who knows how that happened, but it could be that they made this character Bill, who's a crazy hermit, and then at some point, just, hey, maybe he could be gay, and this partner of his is actually his partner. Oh, that's really cool. That makes him so much more interesting. Boom, done. Like that. Once we get to that kind of conversation where that is just the norm, that's where you get that.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree. Right. So. There's articles that I've read about strong female lead characters and how in movies we don't see a lot of them. And it always comes back to movies like Alien, where you have Ripley, who is a very strong female lead character. And so do you know how they got to that? He wrote the part without cast in a gender-neutral way. He wrote the part as a strong character. And I completely agree with what you just said in that right now it's like, oh, let's have the gay character. Well, then we have to have this whole thing about, about this is the gay character and everything centers around that. I think that is, I think creating people and then having everything else kind of be that secondary thing that helps the story Yeah, this is going to sound funny, but it sounds apt, but realizing that gay people are also people, and that is not that is not just the only thing, right? They have interests beyond. Surprise! Yeah. So it's the same thing with like women can be more than just, well, I want some man to save me, and they are, right? They're people, just like everyone. We're all people. We just have.
That's part of good writing, though, isn't it?
Yeah. I would hope so.
I would hope so too.
Apparently not.
Sorry, David. There are a lot of bad writers out there.
I guess.
So yeah.
So with that, I think we have to wrap up our session. I don't know if our panelists will be wandering the conference around here, but if you see them, tap them and you can ask them your question. I would like to thank this awesome group for coming out, taking time out of their Saturday to come talk to all of you.
And again, thank all of you for coming out here.
Thank you.
It was
To the
a real honor
inaugural
to be
Gamer
here.
X. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Be sure to check us up upstairs. We're in the big expo hall. We have some game giveaways. We have a couple of copies of The Sims and then the Mass Effect trilogy. If you spin the wheel, you have a chance to win one of those games. So make sure you come visit us throughout the conference and have a good rest of the conference.
Have a good one, guys.